This is emergency for the first time in America.
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 490.2S1519, certificate number 36749. The Foreign Legion.
On l'appuie ou pas?
Has there ever been a time in your life where you planned or even just fantasized about just walking away and starting over? Like, I don't know what that means. Just getting on a Greyhound bus or just walking out your front door and throwing a lit match behind you, or...
Do you mean, has there been a time this morning between the time I woke up at 10
How
and
many
now
times
at
this
10:20?
morning before your coffee came out?
No, that's been a major feature in my life and identity ever since I was a teenager. Imagining that I would either leave everything behind or have a lengthy prison term.
It amounts to the same thing, right?
Or be forced into the bush to fight for my survival.
Like that bush out front? Like one of the rhododendrons?
No, the bush.
The camellia bush outside.
No, that bush the camellia is not going to hold me and all my gear. No, in Alaska, we call the country the bush.
You're like Australians of the North.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, it's, this thread throughout history of being personally challenged by being forced to leave everything behind.
Right.
It plays a large role in my cosmology.
You feel like it's some kind of racial memory of because here's what I'm thinking. It's not much of an option anymore. Like 500 years ago, 200 years ago, or whatever, people could go to sea. Right. Or they could go to, some unexplored land. They could go west. They could go to Australia. They could go to the gold fields of wherever there were gold fields, or the diamond mines of wherever there were diamond mines. Join the army. Even in the 20th century, you still had people just thinking they would go to solve their problems by going to California or Hawaii or Alaska. I guess you were already in Alaska.
And
you came pre-evacuated.
Well, and I've always contended that the progeny of the West, we descend from the people that couldn't hack it back east and split, right? And I mean, my people have been in Seattle since the 1880s because they, for whatever reason, were driven out of Kentucky.
These are people that couldn't that couldn't hack it multiple times, right?
Yeah, right.
Couldn't hack Europe, split to New England. Couldn't hack New England, went through the Cumberland Gap.
Right.
Couldn't hack Ohio, headed for Colorado.
That's exactly right.
It just keeps, so it's like when you're sitting in your elementary school class and the counselor or the principal or whoever comes by and pulls out the 4 kids that have to go to their special class.
Yeah.
It's like that keeps happening over and over.
Well,
and we are their descendants.
My mom couldn't stay in Ohio, went to Seattle, met my dad, and neither of them could hack it in Seattle and went to Alaska. Right. And it's not
and then you're out of options.
Yeah. It's not like you leave because you're a failure. It's you leave because you're looking for something that the town doesn't provide. So I ended up back in Seattle. I'm kind of a backslider. I needed more electricity.
So Alaska is like the movie Alley with the chain link fence at the end, where the character is suddenly like, oh no.
Well, and you can head deeper into Alaska. I mean, there are places in Alaska. Yeah, there is.
Isn't that it says on the license plate.
But that's the McCandless issue, right? I mean, he's a kid that
right.
ended up going too far out into Alaska. So there is still undiscovered country, but it's surrounded by discovered country.
And you're right. Today, a lot of this impulse turns into urban backsliding. Like, this is not working for me, so Portland or Austin it is, right? Like,
I'm going to get some chickens.
That's people's magical solution. Because it is kind of magical thinking that there's something wrong with my life now. I can't fix me, but I can certainly fix my surroundings easier. I just need a bus ticket.
It is. I mean, it's like Rimbaud. You get this feeling, this romantic feeling that you're going to go to, I mean, in his case, end up being a junior administrator in some...
Where'd he go? North Africa? Where'd Rimbaud go?
He hit all the high spots, and he ended up just stamping passports somewhere.
I never saw the movie, but yeah.
It was a book before it was a movie. But yeah, and so I've done this, right? I mean, I walked from Amsterdam to Istanbul by myself in the late 90s in an attempt to connect, in an attempt to activate that racial memory you're talking about. I was trying to get to a place where I could discover what it was like to be a Magyar or a Celt who arrived, someone who came over from beyond the Volga and felt that there was something in that rhythmic plodding of the feet, the lack of connection to any one place, the watching the sun come up in the morning and go down at night, that I hoped would be an antidote to modernity and to softness.
A lot of our getaway plans today have to be time travel backwards instead of looking outward. And I wonder if that's kind of why this feels like maybe it's just an illusion, but our modernity to us feels like some culminative time, some fin de siècle.
Right, they always do.
And that's why we're doing this project for the future, because we feel like, but there is a sense that's powered by a sense of exhaustion. We've exhausted geography. There's really no vast tracts left to explore until the billionaires get us into space, and maybe a sense of personal exhaustion, like, we're not cut out for adventure, and maybe there is no adventure because of technology or whatever it's done to us.
Well, we were talking earlier today about this being somewhat an age of anxiety, an age of free-floating anxiety, right? I think there have been...
Right. At least Auden's anxiety was caused by the Germans invading the Sudetenland, which is a great reason to be anxious, especially if you live in Czechoslovakia.
The Cold War was a great period of anxiety, but it was pretty clear what we were anxious about. And now there's just anxiety thick on the ground. And there are a lot of people, I'm sure, listening in the future who have read their history books who are shouting, Trump, Trump, Trump. But Trump is
climate change.
Neither thing is adequate to explain the amount of anxiety we feel now. And you'll see in our culture all these people that are spending $400 on a hatchet, right? Or the workwear fashion, the back to the landers,
getting the chicken, getting a beehive.
Yeah, but they're not actually doing the hippie thing of actually going and buying some land in Central Oregon. They're trying to go back to the land in their urban apartment.
Yeah, they're going back to the land after they get home from Amazon.
Yeah, and they're trying to dress like somebody that worked in the boiler room of the USS Maine, but they're working in computers. So there's this constant desire to return to something that's essential. I think that's what people are looking for. What's essential?
Right.
Marie Kondo even is
an
expression. Like what's my everyday carry? What's my go bag?
My whole life, think how great it would be if my whole life was a go bag and I didn't have all these trappings that are clearly not making me happy, because I'm very worried a lot and I have a lot of books. Therefore, I should have fewer books and be less worried.
The whole premise of everyday carry, which is a movement, is that you would have on your possession enough to survive if it all went to hell right now. Like there are people right now probably listening to this program who are
closing their fingers around the handle of their hatchet.
Well, but they carry fishing line in their wallet or in a little packet that they carry with them. Fishing line, little bracelets that can be untied and that are made of parachute cord that you can use in a variety of ways. Little tiny gewgaws that are on their person.
What I like about these people is that they're probably in their 30s or 40s. They know they have never once used the fishing line they carry with them, but they are undeterred.
They've never caught a fish in their life. But yeah, they have that line, and just in case. And it's part of the zombie culture of people who get a lot of pleasure watching shows about civilization coming to an end, and it's them against a faceless army of other.
There's probably some causality thing that goes the other way too, where like I'm very worried and unhappy in civilization as it is. So this is almost wish fulfillment that I can see it blown up. Like,
sure,
modern society's not working for me. So what else you got?
Have you ever read a survivalist magazine? I mean, they can't wait.
I was in the men's room of a diner in Sequim, Washington a couple of weekends ago, and they had a lot of like magazines I didn't know they made anymore, like Soldier of Fortune and stuff. I was like, wait, really? They still print these?
But I mean, there are middle-aged people who live in cities who have built their homes to be redoubts, barricade. They have the ability to turn their home into a fortress. And at least dad is really excited about it. Probably the kids maybe that increases their anxiety, that dad's always walking around checking to make sure the pin is still in his anti-personnel mines.
Well, there was a time when no matter how screwed up your life was or how worried you were about things or just unhappy in general, your escape plan could be your go bag. It could be kind of outward and forward, and not just in an illusion sense that you would tell yourself, but you really could strike out into the unknown.
Literally join the French Foreign Legion.
Literally. Like today you could start a podcast, basically. Things aren't great in my life.
What if I
start a podcast?
What if I got a Hitler haircut, bought a $600 axe, and started a podcast about simple living?
But for a long time, the French Foreign Legion was kind of the proverbial plan B. Like if things go really bad.
Oh, plan X.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, nobody ever really did it. I mean, some people must have done it as their first backup, but it really is like many, many things have to go wrong in my life, but there will always be, as a backstop, the French Foreign Legion,
who will take anyone who can make it.
Famously, that was the image. And the interesting thing about the French Foreign Legion is right there in the name. It's a part of the French army, but it's made up of non-French. Is there a word for people who are not French?
Non-French.
What's the word for people who are not French? Polite?
Non-Français.
Customer service oriented?
I think in the 80s, they would have been called un-French.
Yes, extremely un-French. Faux French, I guess.
But wait, is that true? To join the French Foreign Legion, it is a requirement that you not be French?
Even to this day, I think, to enlist into the French Foreign Legion, you have to say you're not French, and everybody winks at all these washed up French people who are claiming to be Belgians or Swiss or French Canadian.
Oh, they just show up bedraggled at the front door and they're like, I am Canadian.
I am not French despite my outrageous accent.
I'm from Belgique.
I think that's exactly what happens.
Wow.
And these people, they often rise through a lot of the officer corps is French. And I assume it's some of these people rising through the ranks. But the enlisted men, I think to this day have to be non-French, and that's how it started as well.
So part of the deal of joining the French Foreign Legion was that it made you French, right? If you joined the Legion and fought in a war, then you could become a French citizen. It's
not automatic, but yeah, there's about 200 naturalizations a year from the French Foreign Legion.
Wow.
And we can get to that,
mm-hmm.
but it's not unusual. Or at least it wasn't unusual. Today it would be very unusual. Imagine if there was some detachment of the Marines or whatever that was all Argentines or Samoan guys or Inuits or something, we would be like, well, I mean, they're not really American.
But it is true in the U.S. Armed Forces. Well, I don't know why I pronounced it that way. U.S. Armed Forces.
The U.S. Armed Forces. I'm eating some French toast.
You can join the U.S. Army as a foreign national. And it is a path to citizenship. It's just maybe not. It's not a thing where we have whole regiments everyone is from outside the United States.
I remember when I was growing up as a kid in South Korea, Korean kids could get out of their mandatory military service by joining up to be some kind of special detachment or whatever that was a liaison between the Korean Army, the ROK Army, and the 8th Army, the U.S. troops stationed in Korea. So you could be a Katusa, which was some kind of Korean attached to U.S. Army or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And so there were these whole detachments of Korean guys who were just basically ducking their military service. And that's a lot of what happens in the French Foreign Legion today, honestly, is people who were kind of washed out of whatever in their lives, but in some cases, their own country's military. And this probably happened back in the day as well. I mean, we don't think about, when you think about the American Revolution,
Which I do all the time.
which I know you're thinking about right now because
Yes.
you're a good patriot.
Yes, I am.
Like sometimes you get this distant look in your eye, and I can hear the fife and drum. I could just see Lexington and Concord reflected. Because we tell stories about Lafayette and von Steuben,
Right.
Kosciuszko. There were all these Poles and Germans and French.
Well, and the
advisors.
Hessians, they're fighting us.
Right, and these evil German mercenaries that had been dragged in. Were we paying our guys? Like we always talk about how our foreign soldiers are heroic, but the Hessian mercenaries. I mean, I assume we were paying our foreigners too, right?
Well, yeah, except, the foreigners fighting for us. I mean, the French were gleefully fighting the British in the United States.
They weren't fighting for us. They were just fighting against the British.
Fighting the British, right?
We don't care about your revolution.
They were looking for any opportunity to put a chink in the British armor.
But this was very common in 18th and 19th century armies that you would fill out the ranks with detachments of whoever you could hire.
Right.
So, if the Swedes are fighting the Great Northern War against Russia or whoever, they get a regiment of Poles. It's often Poles, I think, because maybe they don't have a country of their own
There are a lot of Poles, and they're often confined just to the area around Warsaw.
We don't have an army right now. Can we join yours?
And the Hessians too, famous. I mean, they didn't just fight in the Revolutionary War; they were mercenaries for hire in any war you had.
Yeah, a lot of the Napoleonic Wars. There were whole German legions fighting Napoleon and filling out the British ranks. Garibaldi, when he's uniting Italy, he formed an international brigade, and he was actually going to use these guys to go take out the Pope. He had this idea that, I really can't unify Italy as long as there's this little king in his little hat sitting in the middle of Rome.
That'll make you popular.
Which is reasonable. So
Kill the Pope.
That's what Italians are always talking. They're always sitting around their gabagool and their whatever, and they're like, yeah, we should kill the Pope.
Well, you think about the 19th century, though. It was such an era of transition.
Yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah, all these modernists who are like, you know what?
It's like Kennedy's moonshot. It's like we kill the Pope and do the other hard things by the end of this decade. What if we just killed the Pope?
Your Kennedy impression is great.
Think how different history would be.
Why don't you do that more?
Yeah, we need to do more Cold War shows so I can do my...
Well, sure. I mean, that Marx is saying even more radical things than
not just kill the Pope, but kill all the popes.
Yeah, kill the popes.
And I guess maybe Garibaldi thought that an international brigade gives you some, it gives you a little bit of distance, and who knows what these guys are going to do.
Plausible deniability.
Like the British still have these Nepalese Gurkhas with swirly curved knives in their belts. That'll make you be a law-abiding citizen in the territories, and you see those guys coming at you.
For sure.
And for a long time, the French Foreign Legion could not fight in France. They were a colonial force, as we shall see. But right into the 20th century, Israel creating a detachment called the Mahal of just kind of world, Jews from all over the world who had come to Israel to fight in the Arab Wars of the 40s. White Rhodesia, just paying any awful person who wanted to go fight for White Rhodesia.
I mean, when I was...
Speaking of Soldier of Fortune magazine.
When I was young, we gobbled up Soldier of Fortune and magazines of that ilk. And the Rhodesian War...
That was your plan B as a kid? I want to go keep Rhodesia safe for the whites.
No, it was just fascinating because Rhodesia became Zimbabwe in 79.
That's right around 7980.
I started reading Soldier of Fortune magazine in 81. And so all of the veterans,
very urgent,
of the Rhodesian conflict were the guys in these magazines with dramatic scars, and they all had super light blonde hair and hawk noses, and they looked just like the most, they were so fundamentally evil looking.
It was probably a dangerous time because now suddenly you got a surplus of thousands of these guys running around. Yeah. What are they doing? Well, are they all turning into Hans Grubers in Nakatoni Plaza?
Yeah, there were lots of terrible things to get into in the early 80s internationally.
I mentioned that the British Army still has their detachment of Nepalese Gurkhas left over from the Raj,
right.
Back when they had all the Gurkhas you could eat. And it's led to a tricky situation diplomatically many times because if Britain wants to deploy these troops, it happened in the Falklands, for example. Britain wanted to deploy these Nepalese Gurkhas in the Falklands, and the Prime Minister, everybody, they don't have a State Department. What do you call their
Whitechapel?
Yeah, why they called Whitechapel, and Jack the Ripper was there. They called what Wait, what do you call the State Department over there?
The Foggy Bottom. No, that's what we call it here.
Diplomatic division, the MI3. Anyway, who was told, you cannot be bringing these foreign nationals. It's going to escalate the Argentine conflict. Nepal's neutral in this.
It's the foreign office.
There we go.
Foreign office.
I just had to think of a nervous John le Carré character being angry about.
You just need to hear the word foreign, which is a big part of this whole episode.
This is the difference between the French and the British. The French have a legion.
Yeah.
The British have an office.
They do.
they have tea breaks. They don't have a legion.
What were you saying about the Gurkhas?
Just that it would have been a diplomatic nightmare to deploy them anywhere because, Nepal, Britain is obviously not neutral in the Falklands, but maybe in the UN, Nepal is. Right. And so the government of Nepal can't have 500 Nepalese guys suddenly running around the Falklands, and the same could be true for Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever Britain wants to put this detachment. So it can lead to weird kind of diplomatic things today.
Nepal has had 7 Marxist revolutions in the last 4 years.
So you think they're not overly concerned about what their overseas dagger-wielding assassins are up to? Go with God.
It's funny when we in the United States don't have a clear idea of what the Nepalese are like, but they are big fighting people. I mean, the Gurkhas were scary.
We talked about Sherpas that have been up and down Everest 22 times. I mean, These are the superheroes. So France had been paying foreign soldiers for centuries, even before the Foreign Legion was founded in 1831. Germans, Swiss, Irish, Italians, Scots, basically anybody for whom things were not going well at home, this is something to do. Like during the French Revolution, fully a third of the troops were not French.
Interesting.
And I assume that's because a lot of the troops were not super loyal to the monarchy during the revolution and just bailed.
Right.
But so they needed to fill the ranks with somebody. But a huge chunk of the French army has not been French for centuries.
This may be hard for futurelings to grasp.
Well, just the idea that we're in a time when every country has big standing armies may be hard for them to grasp.
Or that there are even countries.
Right.
But
imagine how you feel about the reef next door.
Yeah.
That's eating all the algae.
Think about
that's how we feel about Iran.
Think about if every reef in your ocean planet had a different group of crabs that all had different uniforms on that fought one another.
Think how angry you would be when you saw a crab with a different uniform. That crab's not wearing our uniform. Get him.
But very hard for people to recall a time when France was the center of world culture. Like France really mattered. France was where you went if you were going to get educated. France was in a lot of ways, between Paris and London, those were the two fonts of all Western society. So going to France wasn't as strange sounding as it would be now.
Today, it just seems like there's a random location. Yep. But you're absolutely right. France was the most popular destination for soldiers looking for a gig. During the time of Louis XIV, he was thought to be, he's for the troops. He doesn't kneel during the anthem. Louis XIV loved the troops. So a lot of people would, leave their own lame German or Bohemian king or whatever and go fight in Louis's army. And then, of course, after the revolution, even more so, now France is the future, right? Like all these young idealists. I don't want to fight for old, the two Sicilies or wherever I live. France, man, it's just like going to New York or LA today, I guess.
Well, sure. It was before 1848,
China, really.
Right? And France was the first nation to overthrow its monarchy, really. And that happened later on in the 19th century. And almost all of those monarchical depositions.
Yes. Deposals?
Yeah, I think deposition, right? Because when we say deposition, that'll be interesting for the futurelings to argue about.
Is it deposing a witness the same as deposing a
king?
A king?
Yeah, maybe. But all of those were inspired by the French Revolution. Again, that's hard for us to look back and recall that at the time there were kings on the thrones of every other major European nation, and France was.
Are you trying to pass the buck and not blame the American Revolution for the French Revolution?
Well, because the American Revolution didn't depose a king.
That's true.
It just
it's a colonial affair.
It just pushed the administration out.
Who cares what they're doing over there?
But I mean, the French kings were among the most powerful and wealthiest kings in all of time.
But all these starry-eyed young European kids looking to France and the revolution. I mean, imagine it's almost like they're feeling patriotic about a foreign country, like the sense of pride they have in what the French are doing. And I'm going to go and fight for them.
The people.
But the French Foreign Legion was not formed until after the revolution. In 1831, the Bourbons had regained the throne after the revolution, but in 1831, the Ancien regime was tossed out by Louis Philippe, and he had to purge the military. So suddenly there are
all these old revanchist generals and so forth
who were loyal to Charles X, and suddenly they need soldiers. And even more, Louis Philippe had inherited a real rat's nest. What's a more French way to say that? A real horse soup.
Nest du weasel.
Because Charles X, in a last-ditch attempt to keep power by stoking patriotic fervor, had invaded Algeria.
Yes.
Something that would certainly not come back to annoy France for the next century and a half. So they needed all these men to occupy Algeria, a place that nobody really wanted to be. But, Charles X had kind of cunningly waved his hands and said, look over here. Woo, there's a war with the Bey in Africa. So Louis the Philippe formed Louis the Philippe, as I call him. A lot of his teammates just called him the Philippe, the Leapy,
the Leapster.
The Leapster organized a formal legion where you had to be a foreign national, and sent them all to Algeria, and then to every terrible place in the world. Because obviously, no French soldier wanted to be in the Algerian desert.
Right, although it was another example. I mean, that's the colonial enterprise. The Algeria seemed like it was, your fortune could be made. You could escape the pressure of your mom looking over your shoulder and go down to Algeria and I don't know.
Is that why they went? Like their mom kept telling them to clean their rooms?
What drove colonialism was, a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Teens who did not want to clean under their beds.
Adventure and money.
And a lot of the legends that sprang up around the Foreign Legion really do put a very, romantic face on these awful colonialist enterprises. You got these desert forts and these beautiful empty dunes and date palms at oases and veil-clad women with dusky eyes and it all comes back to harems. A lot of Orientalism just comes back to harems.
It sure
and
does.
A lot of these sexually repressed guys who not only their mom won't get out of the room, but they can't get a girlfriend, but they hear that in Algeria, it's like Surf City. It's 2 girls for every boy.
Look, everyone here, all futurelings have read Edward Said because it became.
But before Edward Said taught us how to think about this, the way the lens most people saw the French Foreign Legion through was beau geste, which is not, I don't even know if it's in print in our time. So it's certainly, I doubt, is remembered in the future. But it's an adventure novel by this kind of mysterious Englishman named Percival Christopher Wren. So little is known about this guy that we know he had a first wife and don't know who she is. even her kids don't know. His description of the French Foreign Legion is very colorful and full of detail and romance and incident, which has led many people to assume that during this 5-year lacuna in his army career, he served in the French Foreign Legion. But it's also possible that he was just knocking around Africa, talking to legionnaires in the bar or in the Casbah or whatever. So, but a lot of people got their view of the Foreign Legion from beau geste and its several sequels and his other Foreign Legion novels that he wrote trying to recapture the myth. It's about, we don't remember it today, but it's about a guy named beau geste.
Uh-huh.
Which is hard to believe. Beau geste means what? Grand gesture or something, the beautiful act or something.
Beautiful act.
And I did not know until recently that it's actually about a guy named beau geste, which means to me that P.C. Wren is not a great writer. This is a thing I do a lot when my kids are watching, like I'll be watching Homeland and Claire Danes will come in and I'll be like, hey, that's Carrie Homeland. I'll pretend that the name of the show, it's a hilarious thing my family loves me to do.
You're such a dad.
Like if my daughter's watching a princess movie, I'll be like, hey, it's Princess Tangled. She got out of her tower. Dad, her name's not Princess Tangled. I keep telling you her name's Rapunzel.
Dad.
But in this case, it's actually true. Beau geste is about a dude named beau geste who, he and his brothers get involved in some family inheritance squabble. They're unjustly accused of a jewel theft and they have to go again, what do you do when you run away? And this time you go to the Foreign Legion.
If I had $1 for every time I was unjustly accused of a jewel theft.
You should have run away to North Africa.
Well, I've said that many times.
You stood and faced the music, and what happened? Like, what were the, did you actually get to keep any of the jewels?
Look, the statute of limitations has expired on most of my jewel thievery.
Is your good ingot doorstop from one of these early heists?
I was looking for that the other day. I couldn't find it.
Oh, it's misplaced.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe someone has stolen your ingot and run away to North Africa.
Did someone come perpetrate a jewel heist on me?
Anyway, the Foreign Legion gets deployed to any place awful around the world that French soldiers are loath to go. So starting in North Africa, but then there's war with Spain. They go to the Crimea.
Sure.
There's war with Italy. They go to Mexico.
Yep. French intervened in Mexico
to
there.
To this day, we celebrate, when I say we, I mean proud Latinx people like myself celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
Yep.
Not white guys getting drunk, no.
No.
But the Raza, we remember, it's a defeat, I believe, to the French at the Battle of Puebla.
It's a pretty small holiday in Mexico until recent times.
It hardly exists in Mexico, but...
It's like celebrating the Battle of Baltimore.
But boy, suburban bars with Margarita Monday, love it. Mexico is actually where the Foreign Legion has its its high point. At the Battle of Camarón, a very small group of legionnaires makes a heroic stand against a vastly larger Mexican force. And the officer in charge, one Capitan Jean d'Anjou, extracts a vow over wine. Wine is very big to the Foreign Legion.
Yes.
Over that they will never surrender. And so they're finally down to 5 guys, and they charge out with fixed bayonets. And the Mexican troops are just so dazzled by this heroism that they
capitulate.
They surrender.
They hand over the keys to Mexico,
and they now speak French in Mexico. No, that they let them live. But I guess now that I think about it, those 5 guys surrendered. So
yeah,
too bad, Capitan.
I mean, they let
Jean
you live
d'Anjou.
until you're 150 yards away from your redoubt, and then they stop you and take your guns.
Jean d'Anjou is still the iconic name in the French Foreign Legion. I don't know if we have. Do each of the armed services have like one guy?
Yeah, G.I. Joe.
but a real guy.
Joe.
Joe. Like, it would be as if, like, everybody in the army still talked about Sergeant York so much.
Right.
Like, Jean d'Anjou apparently had a prosthetic hand of his own devising.
Yes.
He's like Luke Skywalker.
Come on.
That he had carved after a musket incident while he was mapping something in Morocco.
Well, but you can join the French Foreign Legion, correct me if I'm wrong, which I know you will do. It's one of your favorite jobs.
It's one of my delightful quirks.
But you can join the Foreign Legion under a pseudonym, can't you?
Yes.
Can't you be like Monsieur X?
Until 2010, it was required.
What?
That you would join under a pseudonym.
You had a nom de guerre?
Yes, you had to. And you could take, the funny thing, so you have to choose a name. I think it would traditionally start with the first letter of your correct name.
Right.
And your nationality would be correct, unless, again, you're covering up your Frenchness.
Right.
But after a year, you could take your old name back. It was just a way to equalize among recruits, I guess, those who really had something to hide from those who did not. So there really is you're starting a new life. You're baptized anew as a legionnaire.
What would your French Foreign Legion name
Does it have to start with J?
No, your name doesn't start with J.
Well, my last name does.
Oh,
I think it's your surname. Like you're in the army, Roderick.
Yeah, right.
Roderick.
Right.
You're in the army now. So I think I would be
Roderick.
So you would choose a 3-syllable name starting with an R.
Oh, is that it's a syllabic?
I don't know.
Similarity?
I don't know.
No, I'm asking you. What would your French Foreign Legion name?
My name would be Jazzmaster J.
Interesting.
No.
Jazzmaster J.
Yeah, actually.
Jazzmaster J.
It has to start with J.
Jazzmaster J?
Yeah, I wonder if it has to be a plausible name, or if you could be like, I would be at Ellis Island being like, my name is Oliver Closeoff. Your name's Oliver Closeoff? Yeah, that's right.
I am Dr. Rosenpenis. No, I
Dr. Rosen. Yeah, I wonder if they just would let you get away with that in the Foreign Legion. They're a ragtag, rough and tumble bunch.
I bet they have a great sense of humor. No, I think you'd have to be something like Jenkins or Jeremiah or Jedediah. All those are names in your family, I'm sure.
Jambalaya.
Did you have Jedediah? I bet you had a Jedediah in your family.
I am nearly certain. I've told you before, my most famous Mormon ancestor is named Zebedee, which is not a name we have anymore.
Why wouldn't your French Foreign Legion name be Zebedee?
It has to start with a J.
I don't know.
Okay,
if you said I'm Zebedee.
Okay, I'd be Private Zebedee. I've decided.
Oh, that's so good.
Jean d'Anjou apparently was an officer who used his real name, but he had whittled this prosthetic hand for himself. And after he died in the battle, the hand was carried back lovingly and placed in the Legionnaires Museum in Aubagne, France.
Huh.
And to this day, every day on April 30th, I guess, the anniversary of the Battle of Cameroon, one lucky Legionnaire gets to carry the hand of Jean d'Anjou aloft in the parade on a little velvet pillow or whatever.
Whoa.
So, these guys are very connected to their romantic globetrotting past.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, that also has a lot of resonance with the Catholic relic.
Yeah, exactly.
Universe.
But why? Yeah, and maybe that explains why he wasn't buried with his artificial limb. Because, at some point somebody was like, we could bury him with his hand or just without one.
Yeah.
That could be religious fervor as well. In the resurrection, of course, he will not need this lame wooden hand.
Yeah, right.
So maybe there's some of that at play.
Yeah, I bet. Let's keep the wooden hand. Let's put it in a case.
Have you ever seen Santa Anna's leg, by the way? Speaking of Mexican prosthetics?
No, I have never.
I guess it's in some military museum in like the Midwest somewhere. Like in Springfield, Illinois, somebody brought back Santa Anna's leg from what we call the Mexican-American War, what they call Gringo Invasion #1 or whatever. And they just took it back and it's sitting in Illinois or something.
Really?
And I would imagine Mexico wants it back.
Illinois?
You don't think of Springfield, Illinois as where you go to see Mexican 19th century Mexican artifacts?
No. I've been to many churches in Europe that have relics, various hands and hearts and noses and so forth.
In Florence, I know it extends to secular stuff because in Florence you can see Galileo's middle finger, which is in the case extended, I guess, to the Pope. If I remember right.
Well, and here in the house, I've probably got 6 or 7 different shards of the True Cross.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, as
eBay?
I'm a little bit of a collector. Yeah.
Is it Craigslist? You go to some guy's garage and he's like, well, I got these shards of the True Cross.
Oh, also I have, where is it? It's right around here. It's the Ark of the Covenant.
Does it spark joy?
That's right.
If the Ark is just sparking Nazi faces and it's not sparking joy, you got to toss it.
No, it sparks joy. I mean, I only open it when
you need to melt some Nazis?
When I need to melt a foreign invaders.
Or if you're defrosting like a Hot Pocket, you're like, this is going to take so long. I forgot to put this in the fridge.
And you just open it
the
up,
Ark.
toss it in.
It's immediately, the cheese is melted.
God, if you're listening, just playing. Super, super fun. We're just having fun here.
So all these overseas assignments for the French Foreign Legion in the 19th century, after they came back from Mexico. In the 1870s, they were actually deployed to try to lift the siege of Paris during the Franco-Prussian War. So that kind of opens the Ark of the Covenant on
having domestic
Foreign Legion interfering in domestic affairs. I guess they've gotten over the bad look. And throughout the 20th century, just wherever there were people needing a job, there was the French Foreign Legion. When World War I broke out, and the Alsace and Lorraine, which we have still not put in the omnibus, but when that was disputed with Germany, the Foreign Legion was where a lot of Alsatians wound up, so they could fight for the French even if they were not citizens.
Right.
And after World War II, a lot of Germans, it was not a good time to have been in the German army.
It was a really bad time to be a German in general.
So a lot of these guys from the Wehrmacht or whatever were like, I was not a Nazi, and I am actually from Canada and will join the Foreign Legion.
I can imagine that the French officers were thrilled to recruit all these.
I assume the French intelligence did kind of go through and see, are there any of these guys that should be standing trial in Nuremberg instead of standing on a fort in Oran?
Right.
But I'm sure a lot of the rank and file became German soldiers who were out of a job.
And it's an unfortunate thing. We don't like to look at French collaboration too closely, but there were some shared.
I kind of do.
There were some shared.
It's one of my favorite things
between the French colonial enterprise and what had formerly been the German global project.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like we still got some brown people for you to fight down here.
That's right.
If you're into that. There was, after the communism fell in the 80s and 90s, suddenly the Foreign Legion is full of Eastern Bloc types, Poles and Slovaks and Bulgarians
Poles again,
and Russians.
looking for a home.
The world is just full of Polish soldiers, with a little cardboard sign saying, "We'll bayonet for food." And more recently, it's become the developing world.
Right.
It's people in Latin America or Central Asia looking for an out. And there's still 180 years later or whatever it is, the French Foreign Legion to be their plan B. Now, the experience, it's not easy to be in the Foreign Legion. All the stuff about how fugitives and criminals and ne'er-do-wells, all those legends were true to a degree in the 19th century. You really could get away from criminal charges. So, it was full of murderers and rapists, I'm sure. And the officer corps was probably not super stoked. Today, Interpol will do background checks on you if you want to join the French Foreign Legion. And if you've done serious crimes, you will not be in the French Foreign Legion for so many reasons.
Is that true, though?
Well, it's still kind of a backstop for people who are awful, but not
currently wanted.
Not currently wanted in 6 states. Like, it's a lot of people who washed out of their own armies. If you were failed too many drug tests, or if you hit an MP, Bo Bergdahl, the guy who deserted in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. I guess he had joined the Coast Guard. He was drummed out of the Coast Guard for insubordination. But before that, he had actually attempted to join the Foreign Legion.
And he tried and failed?
Yeah,
or
I think he washed out. Because
there's a couple, they can reject you, but they have a washout rate of like 9 people for every one.
The training is insane, yes. When I describe the training, you will see why, there's only 9,000 people in the Foreign Legion today.
And is that right?
Yeah, and I think 90% wash out during screening and basic training.
It's such a small organization.
It's a little family.
Oh.
Does this make you want to join more now that you'll be joining such an elite fighting force?
I've actually played concerts for more people than are in the entire French Foreign Legion.
Have you ever played a concert for the entire French Foreign Legion?
No, I wish though. Although, and we can get to this too, I have met Legionnaires.
I want to talk about modern Legionnaires and your experience with them.
Okay. We'll get there.
When I say awful people, sometimes it's not a criminal charge. It's a lot of ex-husbands trying to get out of alimony, apparently.
Oh, sure.
But imagine how awful your divorce must have been to think, what'll solve my problems? The French Foreign Legion.
Well,
get hair implants, for crying out loud. So it's kind of like, it's Last Chance U, basically.
Yeah.
Have you seen the show about the junior college that takes in all these talented but awful football players that have slugged a coach or whatever from real programs?
I have not seen that.
It's all these guys who lost their scholarships at Penn State, and now they're all at this elite junior college where they're all super good players and maybe not so great at adulting, as we say. So the Foreign Legion has kind of become Last Chance U for males of all types, because you do have to be male.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You have to be a man. There's been one woman in Legionnaire history, an English woman named Susan Travers. She was an ambulance driver in World War II and turned out to be such an able landmine avoider and everything else that she actually fought for the Free French and was later, when she retired, she was an officer in the Foreign Legion.
But otherwise, they are excluded.
Explicitly excluded. And there's always a bunch of political movements in France to say, we're going to have this many women in the Foreign Legion by this such and such a date. And it just never happens because of institutional resistance and sexism.
Have you always wanted to learn to play an instrument? Maybe you've even tried at some point, but gave up because you felt lessons were too expensive or that you just didn't have the time. Thankfully, there's Musician. Musician is the fun, easy, and affordable way to learn guitar, piano, bass, ukulele, and even singing. Just download the app to your desktop, tablet, or phone and start playing. Musician gives you 24/7 access to a vast catalog of video lessons from professionally trained educators, as well as thousands of exercises and songs across dozens of music genres, all tailored to your goals. And with Musician's award-winning technology that listens to you play, you'll get real-time feedback on timing and accuracy so you can actually see yourself improving as you learn. Start your extended 14-day free trial of Musician's Premium Plus package at musician.com/start. That's unlimited access to thousands of lessons, exercises, and songs on as many instruments as you want for 2 whole weeks. Just go to musician.com/start. That's YOUSICIAN.com/start.
Can I ask, if this is not part of the regular French...
Are you going to ask if they're all male, where do new baby Legionnaires come from?
No, I have a sense of where they come from. A stork. No, I'm going to ask, how closely is the Legion overseen by the French military, and how much is it truly an independent organization?
Culturally, I get the sense that it's very independent. I mean, it does have an all-French officer corps, but you know, just from looking at the U.S. military, like how a chain of command does not mean that the Marines are super Marine-y, you know?
Right.
And the culture of the Foreign Legion is certainly all its own. It's very alcohol based, for example. Like the Legionnaires have their own. This is kind of their historical legacy. They have their own vineyard in Provence, and so there's Legion made wine that everybody drinks. You'll just get force fed pints of whiskey all throughout Castel, which is what they call their regimental basic training. It's a Christmas morning tradition, pint of whiskey. You're always drinking helmets full of beer. Basically, you need to keep the edge off because training is so brutal. You're going to get sent to the jungles of Guyana or the deserts of Djibouti, and basically people are routinely just getting punched and kicked, and their teeth are knocked out. And they have rules, of course. The French army is saying, but you cannot punch a recruit. So it'll be some awful colonel saying, okay, put your hand up in front of your face, and then he'll punch you through your hand. So it's basically, why are you hitting yourself as a form of basic training?
Oh, I love the French Foreign Legion. They're such bullies.
They've figured it out. They found a workaround.
Good hazing.
You'll have to, just do push-ups on your knuckles till they're bloody. You'll have to, stand in the sun until you've collected a glass full of sweat. And then you can bring the sweat to Sarge and show.
Wasn't that one of the scenes in the movie Seven?
Oh, is that true? Is that one of the sins?
No.
Dehydration? The seventh deadly sin.
The seventh sin, sweating.
And of course, there's this huge culture of marching, even more so than any army, from their North African hike from fort to fort days, which we always romanticize from Beau Geste and Snoopy. And do you like the comic strip Croc, the hilarious 20th century Foreign Legion newspaper comic? Do you not know Croc?
Well, of course I know Croc. The
you
Sunday
just have too
comics,
much to say about Croc.
I was stunned by how much I have to say about Croc.
We should do a whole entry about Croc.
I haven't seen Croc in the paper lately.
Does Croc exist?
Well, it was.
Did Croc wander into the desert and die?
Certainly a feature of our 70s and 80s childhood.
Is there a guy named Croc? I'm not clear.
I don't remember either. But they had that distinctive Foreign Legion hat.
They had the white kepi.
And of course, Snoopy does that sometimes. But, lately Snoopy just sticks to the Red Baron persona.
Well, lately Snoopy hasn't really done anything. Charles Schultz died in 2000 or whatever.
Right, but when I was a kid, right, that Foreign Legion look and feel still had real resonance. You're reminding me.
It was baked into the culture because there were 5 movies of Beau Geste.
Right.
I looked up to see if there were songs about Foreign Legion. I guarantee there's a Stephen Merritt song about the Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure there is, but there is one by the Decemberists.
Oh,
You'll be shocked to hear.
Yeah.
There's a song called Legionnaires' Lament on Castaways and
Of course there is. In fact, I'm not sure, but maybe I appear on that song. It's hard for me to remember all.
Do you feel like you count as a Legionnaire if you are singing harmonies on a song about them?
Maybe I'm an honorary Legionnaire. I'm still waiting to hear back if I'm a Kentucky colonel or not.
Maybe in the meantime, maybe tell them you're a Legionnaire and see if that convinces anyone in the bluegrass state. So because of their culture of marching, they still will do, to get your white helmet, you have to do a 40-kilometer march with a 40-kilogram pack. And I'm too lazy to do the math there. But what is that, 25 miles with 100 pounds on your back?
Yeah.
So,
That's not that hard, actually.
It's doable.
Yeah.
But they just love to march. I think they have the Legionnaires' unofficial motto is Marche ou crève.
Marche ou crève.
Like march or expire. March or die, basically. Those are your 2 choices.
Well, and speaking as someone who has read a lot of Soldier of Fortune magazines from the early 80s and still, keeps one eye on Special Forces culture.
Just in case?
In case
the phone rings one night?
I like to know all the details. I don't think I'm going to ever be recruited by the Special Forces, but when the Central Intelligence Agency needs my services, I'm going to have to interact with Special Forces people.
Sure.
Anyway.
They're a blunt instrument that you will use.
Yeah. The sense among Special Forces people, my sense is that the Foreign Legion, although very capable as a force, spends a lot of its time and energy on some of these archaic...
Like on being Legionnaires?
Well, and like marching and hazing and this real top-down kind of culture of the organization rather than on actually being good at tactics and warfare and so forth. So Special Forces people don't consider the French Foreign Legion to be in the class of a Special Forces.
They're not elite.
No,
particularly.
they're just weird. Like
That kind of matches everything I've read.
Yeah.
When you read about the hazing and just think about the logistical problems of putting all these people together. It's 140 countries today are represented.
Wow.
In the Foreign Legion. So
they don't all speak French, I'm guessing.
Well, to pass basic training, you will get, punished. You will get push-ups or KP or whatever if you are heard speaking your native language. And they used to divide by, back in the 19th century, they would divide by nationality. There'd be a Swedish regiment and a Polish one and a Irish one or whatever. But today they're all mixed up. And if it's really discouraged from forming little language mafias. Like if you don't speak English, you cannot pass basic training without speaking 400 words of French. So that's the level of mastery that's required, which is really, that's like junior high French. That's où est la bibliothèque kind of French. 400 words?
I mean,
I bet I speak 400 words of French.
What are the main words of any military unit?
Yeah, it's just got to be halt and attention and forward.
Oh, I read somewhere that one of the things that the French Foreign Legion was great at, as a result of this very thing, is the kind of military sort of hand signals.
Oh, really?
Where when they're on a secret mission.
Because they have to. Nobody speaks the language.
Yeah. So they're really good at communicating with each other over distance by, being like, over there are two guys and they are.
Do they do the thing where they point at both their eyes with two fingers?
Yeah, I bet
and then point in a direction with their palm?
I'm sure they do that. And I'm sure they can say all kinds of things. Yeah. So they're good at that stuff.
Apparently it's not a bad life. It's the pay at first is 1,500 euro a month, which, considering all your, you're getting a cot and 4 hots.
Yeah.
What is the thing? A cot and 3 hot. What are they?
3 hots and a cot.
3 hots and a cot. Yeah. I mean, all your room and board is taken care of.
But you're also getting a helmet full of beer every once in a while.
Right. You get
whiskey on Christmas.
And more if you're deployed overseas. Often these guys will have to spend 3 months in Chad or Mali doing awful bureaucratic administrative stuff.
Right. 3 months in Chad is actually a great title for an autobiography.
I thought you were going to say a porno.
Oh, 3 nights in Chad. That type of thing.
It was 3 months. So
3 months. that kind of humor might fly on Jeopardy, Ken, but this is an adult program.
This is a podcast. And you get a shiny new rifle, and as you were saying before, it can be a path to citizenship.
Yeah.
You can get either your citizenship or apply for citizenship or 10-year residency in France after a mere 3 years of service. And that's what 80% of the Legionnaires do.
Which is funny because what it really is applying for citizenship in Europe.
Right.
You're not then held to France. You could emigrate to anywhere.
80% of Legionnaires eventually do this and become essentially EU citizens. And if you're wounded as a Legionnaire, that's immediate citizenship. It's called Français par le sang versé, French by virtue of your spilled blood.
Oh, wow.
Because French have always had this kind of meritocratic approach to Frenchness. They would give honorary citizenships to Washington or Jefferson because clearly their souls are French. They have the ideals of the... But...
You just sounded like my dad. They have the ideals of the...
That's how I pronounce Rousseau. I say that his name is Jean-Jacques. And do you remember last year that Malian Spider-Man guy? Do you remember this? There was a kid hanging from a balcony in Paris, and some West African, this guy from Mali, I think like pretty freshly off the boat, is like, he climbs 4 stories like Spider-Man and grabs the kid.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And the next day, like, it's all over YouTube, and Macron gives the guy citizenship because clearly this guy has the spirit of the Le Français. So what about your Legionnaire experiences?
So I went on basically it wasn't USO, it was the Army Entertainment Office.
The AEO.
I forget what it was exactly
You're like the
called.
Bob Hope of the AEO. Hey folks, this is John singing long winter songs.
Hey
Roderick.
there. And then I swung my golf club.
And Joey Heatherton came out.
So a friend of mine, or rather actually a podcast listener of one of my other shows, also was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who was a drone pilot, combat veteran, and he was charged with opening and managing various drone bases in Africa on behalf of the U.S. Air Force, which were not widely publicized because we don't...
Because Africans would be delighted, I'm sure.
And there's no Air Force base in Africa, but there are. And they are these little drone bases. And
is it just like a couple tents somewhere?
No, they end up being in coordination with other governments.
I
But
see. There's a lot you can't say here.
what you end up with is there's an airport that already exists, and the Air Force goes in and takes kind of one side of it or one quarter of it and builds a little base. And they are tents and shipping containers. I mean, they are
Quonset huts? Love a good Quonset hut.
if there are Quonset huts that were already there, but the Air Force doesn't build Quonset huts anymore, not like they used to. Half of Alaska was Quonset huts when I was a kid.
I used to go to church in a Quonset hut with stained glass windows in South Korea
See?
on the Army base.
Quonset huts, they were great. I don't know why because tents are cheaper. Anyway, so we went on a little tour where we played for the troops in Niger and Ethiopia and aforementioned Djibouti. We went to Burkina Faso.
I've never been to aforementioned Djibouti.
Aforementioned Djibouti.
Remember during the revolution when it split into the Republic of Djibouti and aforementioned Djibouti?
Well, and aforementioned Djibouti was a great teen dance club here in Seattle in the 1980s.
Did you play Shake Djibouti?
Shake,
Did you get to meet the Sheikh of Djibouti?
We did not. No, and Djibouti right now is under a pretty repressive government.
A repressive sheikh.
But there is a huge Navy base in
Yes.
Djibouti.
And China has built one next door.
That's right.
Did you know about
And
this?
China is building railroads in East Africa like Huckle D. Buck. China is going to be the major power
That's
there.
going to be West China, basically. China will end at the Nile River.
But for instance, the Navy base there in Djibouti has an incredible foreign component. There are Japanese army there. There's French. There's special forces of every stripe.
Mm-hmm.
But in Niger, we played at a little base outside of Niamey, and the base was home to this Air Force group, but also some special forces. You know, and special forces people, you can tell them.
Like U.S. Special Forces
Yeah.
people? Or?
You can tell them from a mile away because they have beards and they're all chewing tobacco, and they have baseball caps that look like they're covered with chewing tobacco.
You look like the Boston Red Sox, basically. Like you're allowed to look like the Red Sox if you took out Bin Laden.
But there was also a contingent of French Foreign Legion soldiers and French commandos at this base, because this was during that period, and it's ongoing. So Boko Haram was in Nigeria,
Yeah.
and all those Islamic groups in Mali, and they were all kind of contending for this area in northeastern Niger that's sort of just hard to govern.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these groups were milling around, all these people with fascinating mustaches in camouflage dungarees who had, like faraway looks in their eyes.
It is the modern day version of just being in the Casbah from some 30s movie, right?
And we were effectively like playing. So they set up a stage for us and shone a bunch of like anti-aircraft searchlights on us.
Were people delighted? Do they not get a lot of entertainment
They
there,
don't
I'm
get
guessing?
any entertainment. And I don't know if delighted.
Not that that's the only reason people would be delighted by your music, John. Were these people delighted because they had never seen another musician? I'm sure they would enjoy it anyway.
I think they just liked that people were there to entertain them. And I
like when company comes over.
Yeah, played a full set of songs to, maybe like not rapturous applause, but certainly like fun. And the French soldiers were all drinking, whereas the American soldiers were not.
House.
It was rowdy. It was, it felt like, Niamey is a huge city and we weren't that far out of it, but it was far enough away that it felt like we were in the bush. There were giraffes around. I mean, it was like pretty interesting.
Which is not typical at one of your shows, right? I've seen you play and I've never seen a giraffe.
No, it's not. A giraffe at your show really reduces the number of tickets you can sell, and so it's not advantageous to the band.
It's like the mom in the back who's had too many wines and is standing up when no one else wants to stand up.
Yeah. Woo!
That's what it's like sitting behind a giraffe at a rock show.
Anyway, they definitely had a very different vibe, a strong vibe. Even the U.S. Special Forces guys who are covered in Chew Spit, they still feel pretty disciplined, fairly disciplined. And the French guys felt very rogue by comparison. They kind of sat with their feet up on the desk. They just had a little bit more.
They're the original bad boys.
Yeah, they had some je ne sais quoi. They had some
back alimony, probably.
Sacre bleu.
They had some unpaid alimony.
They did, right? They got out of wherever they were from. And that concludes the Foreign Legion. Entry 490.2S1519, certificate number 36749 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, you...
It's probably drone-based,
should
right?
avoid it at all costs.
The Air Force is just flying emails directly to you in drones.
I'm imagining, and this might be a little Black Mirror, but I'm imagining a world in which social media is cordoned so that not everyone can join the Twitter or Facebook of the Futurelings time. But it becomes...
Like it's chronologically cordoned?
It's like hierarchically cordoned.
Oh, it's like having a sky lounge at an airport.
Yeah, so I think probably lots and lots of Silicon Valley disruptors are even now probably trying to popularize their social media that is somewhat exclusive. You have to apply.
You have to pay $120 a year.
Yeah, and a friend of mine got me an account on some dating site that was only for professional hot ladies and the professional dudes that...
Hot ladies and not hot guys with tech jobs.
Tons of money.
Yeah.
And I spent a few days on there.
No offense.
No, it's quite all right. I don't have either thing, looks or money. Spent a few days on there and just felt like, oh, this is just as bad as anywhere. And the exclusivity, the quote unquote exclusivity of it is both fake and also attracts the worst elements, right?
The exclusivity is fake because you can't make the price enough to actually keep out the riffraff?
No, the exclusivity is fake because people trying to popularize the app want as many people as they can.
They need thousands of users.
Right. And so when they discover that every rich person in the world didn't immediately join their site, they just start lowering the standards, but while maintaining the premise, like, oh, you're lucky to be here. Invite 5 friends. We'll have to vet them. They may
have
not
to be
get
rich
in.
or hot.
Yeah. But invite 5 friends. Like, oh, you can smell the blood in the water. But yeah, I'm thinking Futurelings will find that maybe if they are excluded from all of the Delta Sky Lounge level of social media sites, that there's only one course left, which is to leave it all behind and join the French Foreign Legion.
The French Foreign Legion of social media?
Yeah.
Or literally the French Foreign Legion?
Well, maybe either both. Maybe the French Foreign Legion, maybe it will all happen in social media because
social media is a French Foreign Legion. You do have to, you essentially change your name.
Right.
all the bad things you've done before do not follow you. And
your alimony doesn't work there.
And you have to go to awful places and do awful things until your knuckles bleed.
Well, in the meantime, Ken and I are populists. We're, American people.
Men of the people.
But we want everyone to have access to our social media hilarities. And so you can find us at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick. Our program is at Omnibus Project. I am on Instagram at John Roderick. So many great pictures over there of funny things and good laughs.
Every bath you've ever taken.
Lots and lots of food. I always take pictures of... I don't have a pet. You'll never see a single picture of my dog looking...
Nary a sandwich or pug to offend the eye.
Oh, all those pictures where people are like taking pictures of their dog and they imagine their dog is looking at them with some kind of significant intelligence behind their eyes. And then you just see the picture and you're like, yeah, it's a picture of a dog, bro. There's nothing there for me.
My dog has never done anything good enough to be on social media.
You've never... Your dog.
I'm waiting.
Your poor little dumb dog.
I'm sure. I have 2 dogs now, and if they do something cute, I'm ready.
Sure.
I'll post it.
You're there.
But they've just done average things.
They're underachievers.
They just sit and lick themselves.
We recommend, if that is, and Futurelings, that may be a thing that you consider like basically a standard of joining society, that you be able to sit and lick yourself.
Yeah, I don't mean to offend if that's your courtship ritual in your era.
It would be hard for us to do in a seemly way. You may not be super aware of what our physiology is.
If you tried to replace a business handshake with, licking somebody else's hindquarters, logistically, it's tough.
Honestly, I've known you, Ken, for many years now. I have never seen you lick anything. Not a single thing. You put things in your mouth.
But you've never seen me lick anything?
I've never seen you lick a thing.
Would you like to?
No.
No, we're fine like this, right?
You can email us at omnibusproject@howstuffworks.com. We recommend that you join our Facebook group, the Omnibus Futurelings. Even if you have deleted Facebook, we recommend you reactivate your Facebook account because, as we all know, you cannot really delete your Facebook account. It's still there. All you have to do is go back and show even the slightest bit of interest, and it will all repopulate instantly.
It's like how you're always a drug addict.
Yeah, right. You can't just go have a shot of booze on New Year's Day.
You can never be cured from Facebook.
Yeah. It's still there, and even if you shut it down and you feel virtuous about it, forget it. Go back just to join the Futurelings because they are hilarious. And you can mail us things at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
Listeners, from our vantage point here in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization will survive. Certainly from our lack of French Foreign Legion-like options, it seems as if we are reaching some kind of end time. We hope and pray that no catastrophe will end our civilization, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word to you. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.